Hello. Welcome everyone to tonight's program. My name is Sarah and I'm the Education Assistant at Dunlap Art Gallery. Welcome to Discussion, Sculpting in Pandemic Times. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that RPL Film Theatre and our moderator for the evening, Brian Stockton, and the lands on which we're virtually gathering today are all situated on Treaty 4 territory, which are the original lands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And also connecting with us shortly, Mike Maryniuk is joining us from Treaty 1 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And last but not least, Conor McNally is also joining us, and he's joining us from Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional land and home for many Indigenous peoples, including Cree, Saulteaux, Niitsitapi, which is Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota, Sioux peoples. All right, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Brian Stockton, tonight's moderator. Brian Stockton is a Regina-based filmmaker and educator. He holds a BFA in film production from the University of Regina, an MFA in film production from York University in Toronto, and was a director resident at Norman Jewison's Canadian Film Centre. He has a large body of work that includes animation, documentary, and fiction filmmaking. Stockton's films have screened at festivals around the world, including several world premieres at the Toronto International Film Festival. His most recent work includes the feature film comedy, The Sabbatical, 2015, and The Epic Story of My Life in 10 Short Films, a series created between 2002 and 2018. Stockton is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Film at the University of Regina. Welcome, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sarah, and thanks to the Dunlop and the RPL Film Theatre and the NFB for asking me to do this. It's great. So Sarah is going to leave us and leave us with Conor McNally and Mike Maryniuk, and I have introductions for each of them. So Conor McNally is a filmmaker and photographer based in Amiskwasi, Edmonton, Alberta, Treaty 6. He's made numerous short films to date, with his most recent being Likakimat, 2019. He's a proud father and member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. So welcome to Conor.
Hello.
And Mike Maryniuk is a completely self-taught film virtuoso. Did you write this, Mike?
No. I didn't, actually.
Mike Maryniuk is a completely self-taught film virtuoso, was born in Winnipeg, but raised in the rural backcountry of Manitoba. His style is an inventive hybrid of Michel Gondry, Caroline Leaf, and Les Blanc. Maryniuk started making hand-processed black and white 16mm films after finding some 1920s movie posters while working on a demolition of a shoe store. Since then, his films have screened at Sundance, South by Southwest, New York Views from the Avant-Garde, the Toronto International Film Festival, and around the globe. So welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
So here we are virtually gathered together. I'm coming to you from the basement of my house. This is actually a bomb shelter. My house was built in 1962, and they were kind enough to include a bomb shelter in the basement. And so I've added some sound baffling and stuff, and some lighting, and it works out as a pretty good recording studio and virtual presentation studio. So, and you guys, I guess, coming to you from your homes in your various cities?
Yeah, I'm in Winnipeg, where it looks like a bomb went off. So, there you go.
I'm in my living room. Yeah, it's a bomb probably also went off in here today too.
Yeah, so we are here for the next 90 minutes or so, and people will be joining in and watching from, I guess, around the world. You will be able to add comments in the comment section of the chat there. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments, and I will try and keep an eye on them, and Sarah will try and keep an eye on them, and we can add some questions into this mix as we go along. So, but that said, we are kind of going to just wing it too. So we'll see what happens. So let me just start by asking both of you. So the genesis of this project, I guess, was the National Film Board reaching out and wanting to make some films, in pandemic times. So maybe just each of you tell me what that was like, the process of, getting the commission and getting started, and how that worked.
Sure. I guess I'll go first. Yeah, how did it all start? Well, Koti Savard, who's a producer out of the Northwest Studios here, she contacted me, and obviously we were in lockdown, if you will, but I don't know if you even call it that. And she said, "Yeah, we're commissioning filmmakers to do COVID-related films, and I know you as somebody who can work in isolation." And I was like, "Yeah, that's my deal. I shoot, I direct, I edit, kind of try and do all of it, if you will, or as much as I can." And
you had an idea right away? Like, was it something immediately you knew what to do?
No. I was like, I need time to think about this. And it happened. It just so happened that my younger brother and we were spending a lot of time together because he was stuck in Edmonton. He was living in Vancouver, and he flew here for a play that my dad was in, which got shut down right after the opening night. So we got to see the play, which was cool. But then it got shut down, and then he was stuck here, and we were hanging out. And it just dawned on me that he had an interesting story to tell, which relates to being locked down. Obviously very different, but for I'm assuming everyone here has seen the film, so we found that there were some similarities as well.
Yeah, so it's not about this specific lockdown. It's not about a COVID lockdown, but a similar experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, the hope is that everyone has seen the films. They're just, 5 minutes, 4 minutes. I think Sarah can probably put the links for the films in the chat if anybody hasn't seen them. And we will be looking at the films, although sort of without sound, because we're kind of just going to keep talking about them. So Mike, tell us, how did yours get started?
Well, it's kind of in a similar way. I got a phone call from John Montez, and who's the producer and a friend, and he's kind of described what they wanted to do with the project. And he kind of said, well, this is kind of tailor-made for someone like you who does a lot of things yourself, and maybe you can do an animation, or you can work with found footage or something like that, but just know that it's going to be a very quick turnaround. So maybe think about found footage. And I had made a found footage film in the past with l'Atelier National du Manitoba, Matthew Rankin and Walter Forsberg, myself. And so I kind of took that and came up with a few ideas. But the first thing I did was look over, and we had started to grow some herbs and some tomatoes in a little kind of thing that has a light attached to it. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to do like a time lapse or something of plants growing? And so it started with the idea of this, like a person alone with a plant, and the plant wants to kind of like go into the outside world or something. But it evolved from that.
It kind of reminds me of a joke you might see in a film where, like, the producer turns to you and says, "Do you have an idea for a film?" And you just start looking around the room. Yeah, a plant table film or something like that. That sounds like pretty much how it worked.
That sounds like my life.
You mentioned quick turnaround. So what was the turnaround for these films?
Boy, I think it was like 2 months in my case or something. Dates are all pretty blurry now, but I think I sent it in late August or early September 2020, and started in maybe I started with a pitch in June or something like that.
And was that kind of the same for you, Mike?
Yeah, same for me. It was there was like a week and a half to kind of like mumble out some ideas and then just go to it. So I started getting there was a group of researchers and archivists and John Montez who kind of started getting me footage from the board and stuff like that. And I just kind of flew into it. It's a great way to make a film, though.
Yeah, and I used to work that way a lot myself. Like, you know, and somebody did actually ask me to participate in a COVID kind of filmmaking thing, but yeah, I don't know. I've evolved over the years to really enjoy working with people. So, you know, you guys have that advantage of, you know, I've made many films just locked away in my basement by myself. So I totally get that.
Yeah, and I mean, I wasn't obviously, you know, my brother and I were in a bubble together, so it wasn't totally alone. And had he not been around, I don't know what I would have pitched to Koti. I'm sure I would have come up with something, but probably not something as interesting, because lately I've been personally more interested in telling stories from people. And this style is heavily influenced by a film by Lindsay McIntyre that I saw about a guy who makes sculptures out of junk. And yeah, so I was heavily inspired by her film.
And did you guys require scripts? So you did have to present some kind of an idea, but did it have to be like a finished script?
Well, for me, it was more kind of just being able to, you know, turn it into sentences or a couple paragraphs. For me, there was going to be no dialogue, and there were just 5 points that I wanted to hit on, and there were areas that I wanted to explore, and that informed the type of archives that I was going to start working with. And the archives were going to reveal more about what the film was going to be. That was the hope, at least. Yeah.
And Conor, yours, script-wise?
Well, I just had to provide, like, I made a treatment, if you will. So, you know, a description, a rough description of what, you know, he was going to talk about. And, you know, sometimes you make these treatments and you stick to it. But in my experience, and maybe I'm not very professional, but, you know, sometimes it doesn't go as planned. And, you know, maybe that's for the best sometimes. And I should go back and read what I wrote and see if I followed it or not.
Yeah, I think we should talk about this in terms of both of the films. I get the sense there's kind of an improvised nature to both of them, which is actually a bit strange because one is more like a documentary and Mike's is more like an animated film. But is it fair to say, Mike, that yours is kind of improvised as well?
Yeah, I think the original title was Night Flowers. I even did a Radio Canada interview where I talked about this film, Night Flowers, that no one will be able to find now. And there was going to be, we grew these moonflowers that were a vine and would actually flower at night. And but they were going to only flower at night in July. And so that was going to be too late. But we grew them and they eventually did their thing. But so I was able to kind of like recreate those using time lapse with black light, with UV light. And they had a sense of night. Yeah.
So, but were they the night flowers you had originally intended, or?
No, the night flowers are there. Yeah. But they were interesting flowers as well. The night flowers that I was interested in were called moonflowers, and they would flower to the light of the moon. And similar to like how gourds have flowers that open up right as the moon comes out. So yeah, that was an interesting visual to me, and that was a good starting point, right? Is to see these things blooming at night. And it was, to me, it was something that paired well with the idea of dreaming and dream state, dream logic, and the people were talking about having really intense dreams for the first time. during the first portion of the lockdown or whatever. And yeah, and so that was interesting to me, you know, that there was this kind of collective unconsciousness, you know, or something where everyone was having these very intense dreams, and some people for the first time in their lives remembered their dreams. And being an avid kind of like dream mapper, I was interested in that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention too that the title of this talk we came up with, or John Montez came up with, was "Sculpting in Pandemic Time," which is a reference to a book by Andrei Tarkovsky, the Russian filmmaker. And I think, Connor, you had read the book as well. It's a big favorite of mine.
No. I've read excerpts of it, though.
Excerpts?
Yeah, no.
But it's a great book because Tarkovsky really puts forth this idea that, you know, we're often told that editing is the cornerstone of film art, that, you know, editing is the thing that makes it unique. And Tarkovsky says the opposite. No. It's like the long take is what makes film what it is. Like, you're capturing this moment in time. And that's why he calls it sculpting in time. It's like you can set up a camera, you point it at something that's happening, and you've captured that moment in time, and you've captured it forever, basically.
Yeah.
So I just I've always loved that book and just the idea of that. And I think ultimately that's always what we're doing, is we're capturing these moments in time. And you know, documentary or animation, which is a slightly more weird one because you're kind of capturing it a frame at a time. But I think that the same thing, the same idea persists. I don't know, Mike, have you read the Tarkovsky book?
I haven't, but obviously time is something that is present in the film and something I'm exploring. And the concept of having, you know, the time to do things and nothing but it was really interesting. And so I think with the artistic freedom that we were given with this project, you know, creates a lot of elbow room to work with. And if you stick your hands out even farther, you know, that creates balance. And then if you hold the past in one hand and the future in the other, and kind of imagine where you are and kind of bounce these ideas off of the past and the future, you can really follow even the most tightropiest thin narrative.
The other thing that made me think of too was Arrival, the Denis Villeneuve film Arrival, the science fiction film, which is also about time and the idea that we exist kind of in all timelines at once. And that somehow seems to relate, I think, to both of your films and the way we're kind of experiencing time in a different way in this weird pandemic world.
Yeah, and I mean, the big question I seem to get about my filmmaking is, okay, why do you shoot on film? Like, why celluloid? And it relates to time, certainly, because when you're shooting on film, you have to, you know, do light meter reading. You know, you might want to take a bit more time to frame things, double check it's in focus. I've screwed up all of these things before. But, you know, also too, when you record something or when you capture it on film, you can't do like a playback and check it out. You have to, you know, that's what we got. I'm going to send this off to the lab, which is all the way in Toronto. And then I'm not going to see how it turns out until I get the digital scan back in this case. And, you know, I guess we'll talk about this when we play the films. But yeah, even when my brother cut that tree down, it's like we could have maybe found another tree to cut down, but it's a big deal when you cut a big tree down. And he had never done that before. So we were all pretty nervous. Like, is it going to fall towards the camera? And he was like, no, it'll be good. And then afterwards he was like, yeah, I'd never done that before. I can't believe it fell the way I wanted. And then
did you have to worry about running out of film? Because usually film magazines are quite short. Or
yeah, we timed it so I shot it on a Bolex, and I think the run time, the longest,
27 seconds.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact number, but it was, he yelled out or something And then I started recording, and I was really, really worried that it was just going to run out, but it didn't. It worked. So yeah.
No, that's quite amazing. Yeah, no, the Bolex 27 seconds approximately that you get out of a wine. So it's remarkable you even tried to do that. You didn't think about having like a digital backup or something in case it didn't work?
Fuck no.
Well, there's a famous story about Tarkovsky on his film The Sacrifice.
That's right. Yeah.
Where the final 10 minutes of the film, it's a 10-minute take where they burn down a house. And so at the start of the take, there's just a little bit of a fire. And by the end of the 10 minutes, the whole house is in flames and starting to collapse and stuff.
Right.
And very famously, they were halfway through the shot and the camera jammed, which almost never happens. Like an Aeroflex BL4, they were rock solid. They almost never jam. But of course, the one time it does is, so they had to build the house again and burn it down again. And when they shot it the second time, they shot it with 2 cameras just in case.
Right. And if I was to go back in time, I would have set up another Bolex or something, and maybe try to tether them or something like that, like record and then start recording the other one. But that wasn't in my head. I was like, yeah, let's just shoot the tree. You chopping the tree down.
But it is also just film versus digital is different that way. Like if it's a 3-minute magazine or a 12-minute magazine, like it is still, I don't know. There's something about when the camera starts to roll. It's just more definite, like it's more finite and it is more. Some people have made the argument that you get a better performance from actors if they're shooting with film because it just everything. I don't know. It's kind of heightened or something.
Yeah,
and it's expensive too, more expensive.
Yeah, my heart was racing when we were doing that shot. Mostly because I was worried the tree was going to fall on me. That was the main concern. But no, it all worked out, and I probably I'd do it all again.
And Mike, yours is digital and animation, but it sounds like you had kind of many different cameras going.
Yeah, I did. Just to speak to Conor's tree falling thing, if you're wearing a high visibility vest, that's usually a pretty good way of not getting hit by a tree.
Right. Yeah, or a hard hat too, or something.
So yeah, I had 2 or 3 cameras going. Usually I had 2 going, doing time lapses over 7 days. And then I would have one that I was doing stop motion with. And it worked well. There were other times that I would have to pull one off of an animation and stuff like that. And so I had 3 different little setups. And we actually we didn't have access. I have a studio as well, but we weren't allowed to go to the studio. But we were allowed to bring stuff here. So we kind of swapped out some stuff. And the room behind me is actually where I did most of the animation. I set up several grow lights and blacked out the windows, and like I was making a few extra dollars or something. But it was it was great. We had it was a fun way to do things because I always felt like I was working.
Yeah, but it didn't get in the way because you have to live then in the same space, so you didn't feel like you were always at work, or I guess maybe you don't mind being always at work.
It's just been this way for a year. I mean, we're working artists, so we both are just always. It's just always working, really, and that's I know it's the same. Probably.
I'm right there with you. My editing computer is right beside my bed. It's pathetic. It's like get out of bed, eat some breakfast, go to work, right beside like.
Yeah, I joked like I could have like a dog leash around my belt of my pants, and I could make my way to the washroom, the kitchen, and my 4 stations, and then this is where I was editing right here. So, and I actually had I had them tethered to the computer as well, so that I could see them, from other rooms. So I had multiple USB cables running from 3 different spots, and I would just, go into Dragon Frame and stuff like that.
So they were all feeding into the same computer?
One of them always was, but they
Yeah.
had cables so that I could go to each camera. And sometimes I would use drag and frame on the computer, and sometimes I would just use like a time-lapse function within the cameras themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think maybe we should get to starting to look at the film. So we sort of planned this out as a bit of a director's commentary track where we're going to play the films. We'll start with Conor's film, where we'll play the film, and Conor can just talk about it. And I may interrupt as we go along, but
maybe it should be a bit more conversational. I don't know.
and go.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the NFB logo that I had to put on.
And that's a new one, right? Like the sort of.
And I asked to use the original one, and they said no. But so actually, the title sequence here is a total ripoff of Very Nice, Very Nice. I tried to copy it as much as I could, like the typeface.
Yeah, the famous NFB film by Arthur Lipset.
That's right. Yeah, huge inspiration. And so we had shot a whole sequence where my brother was playing Minecraft, this video game that I don't know much about, but he said he did a lot of video gaming when he was under house arrest, and he also did a lot of video gaming during COVID and still does. But we cut all the Minecraft stuff. I guess it would have been tough for legal reasons to include some of the footage. And so we shot the forest sequence. We shot a friend of mine, Patrick Arez-Pilon, shout out if you're watching. We shot this on his family's land just outside of Edmonton. They had a big forest there, and I asked if we could, we had been harvesting wood from them for a bit, and I asked if we could come do some shooting, and he graciously said yes.
And these double exposures, is that done in camera or in post?
Yeah, these are all in camera. So there's a little tool with the Bolex where you can rewind it. And so yeah, I would shoot a sequence, and I would typically try and underexpose it a little bit, and then rewind it. And there's, I guess, numbers and stuff, so you can keep track of where you are. And then I would shoot over it. And here's Riley playing video games in my parents' basement. Yeah, it's too bad the Minecraft stuff got cut, because there's some good multiple exposure shots there. And here's one of his favorite pastimes, chopping firewood. And I don't know why he was doing this, but the visuals were good. Oh, and here's my dog. We just got this puppy, and he was just a few weeks, he was like 9 or 10 weeks old or something, maybe a little bit older. And I wasn't going to use that shot because I sort of screwed up on it on the focus pull. But when I was editing, I was like, oh, this is a nice moment here. Here he is gaming again.
Yeah, no, the fact that it's a little bit out of focus in that shot, it totally works. And
it's cute. Okay, so this is really important. Riley and I, we got really into kettlebells a couple years ago, and so that's him swinging the kettlebell in my backyard. And and as we were shooting, sometimes I wouldn't even roll the camera. I would just make him work out, and then I'd be like, okay, you got to do that trick again. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, keep going. And so he would be all sweaty and stuff. It was funny. Here he's cleaning his chainsaw, which you need to do quite often, I guess. I didn't know that, but you gotta, he got all the gear too. He's had this chainsaw for a couple of years. I don't remember his rationale for buying one, because he's not he's never worked in forestry. Oh, and here's the famous shot. Here comes the tree. Boom. And then, and this, when I was cutting the film, I cut it really early. And then I realized, no, because I cut it because of that tilt down. I was like, oh, why did I do that? But then I kept it in. I decided to keep it in, and I'm glad I did. Because again, sometimes we cut shots really fast, but maybe just leave the mistakes in there. And that's why they say sometimes, the director shouldn't edit their own films, because we become attached and stuff to the film. And here's Riley lifting weights. Again, I did the same thing where I wouldn't roll. I just make him lift more weights. Yeah, and then another one of these double exposure shots that we sort of, it's a classic documentary. It's all planned out, and then here we are in Mill Creek Ravine, where I take my dog for walks every day, and I've actually made a movie, like a experimental film about Mill Creek, and it's just a few blocks from my house, and it's just a great place to kind of feel like you're out of the city a little bit, even though you're really in the heart of the city. And and then I came up with this goofy end title sequence because I was like, oh, the movie's so short, but I've got all this like cool footage that I'd love to still share with people. And so I made this title sequence. You can see Mike Tyson, Métis flag, tough guys. I don't know why I'm laughing, because it's Riley and I love lifting weights, and I do too, but it's funny being a jock and being a filmmaker as well, or like an artist, because people, oh, how can you be a hockey fan and be into weightlifting but also be into like experimental film? And I'm like, why not? And yeah, this shot especially of him lifting weights is pretty funny. So yeah, we recorded the audio interview in my garage, and then we did all this shooting there. And yeah, Mill Creek Ravine and my parents' house and my friend Pat's land. So it was pretty local shoot, which is what I like. I like to say that I only like to do shoots in my neighborhood as much as possible, because I don't like traveling.
I've made many films in this house. I've shot in this very room. Yeah,
it's perfect. Yeah. So anyway, that's the
that's great. So there's an interview, or sort of a voiceover, I don't know what you call it, of your brother talking through the film. So did that become kind of I don't know, is that what you started with when you were editing, like deciding which parts of that to use?
Yeah, that's exactly how I started. How did I do this? I did the audio interview first. Like, we just sat down, and it was the first time Riley had ever recounted this story in this way. There'd been other times where he's had to tell this story, but I don't want to speak for him, but I think there's probably a therapeutic element to it, where it was just him and I was like, I wasn't trying to like pry too much and stuff, but he was willing to be vulnerable and open up, which was really cool. And my family, we always bug Riley that he has like Riley logic or Riley-isms, but in the film they come across as very insightful and very poetic. But if you're around someone like my brother all the time, eventually you can be like, man, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, shut up. But in this instance, I was like, no, Riley, what you're saying is very profound. And we had talked a little bit before I hit record on the sound recorder, just to sort of be like, yeah, this is kind of what I'm thinking, and what do you think? And he was a little bit apprehensive at first about sharing this story, but I'm glad he came through and trusted me to make something that wasn't gonna make him look like an idiot or like a crazy. Sorry, I don't mean that word, but you know what I mean. Like, I wanted to really honor his story and do it in a caring way as well.
Did you, with that in mind, did you plan to show it to him before it was finalized? Did you want to kind of get his approval, or was that not?
Yeah. Oh, that's a huge thing for me when I make films, especially documentary films with people, is just showing them as the edit is coming along, be like, this is where it's going, and then before sending it to the NFB, I was like, hey, check this out. This is what it is. And he was like, oh, this is great. And I'm glad he let me do it, because I think it's an important story. And at the time that we were shooting it, of course, there was a lot of publicized police brutality, especially from media in the States. Of course, police brutality continues, but at the time it was at the forefront of news media. So it seemed very topical to talk about that in conjunction with lockdowns.
And it's a fairly short film, so I don't know, did you end up with 87 hours of the audio part, or like were you able to, like, did you have to maybe direct him to be more concise, or?
Yeah, not so much. We talked, I think the audio recording lasts about like the raw recording was like an hour, and we took a break even as we were doing it. And so I just whittled it down, you know what I mean? Like it's I guess that's actually related to the Tarkovsky thing, is this idea that you're taking a segment of time and then you're molding it into something, right? You're sculpting time. So yeah, that's definitely how the audio interview took place and stuff. Yeah.
And the shot where the tree falls down and then he walks towards the camera, that definitely works best, I think, to leave that in. And that's the Tarkovsky thing to do, is to just let the camera run as much as possible. So we get the tree, we get him walking towards the camera. The more things that you can do in the shot, I think, the better. And that actually, we'll get back to Mike later, but it's kind of a Buster Keaton thing as well. Buster Keaton is referenced in Mike's film.
Yeah.
And that was kind of his thing too, is if you're going to do the stunt for real, do it with as few cuts as possible, and try not to kill yourself.
I will say though, it's challenging because audiences now generally we're sort of conditioned for the fast cuts, right?
Yeah.
And people, at least I recall being in the theaters and watching like a Tarkovsky movie, for instance, or Bellatar, right? These really slow European films. And people, I feel as though, get kind of like anxious when there's not a cut right away. And as a filmmaker, I find sometimes I'm like, well, I need to put a cut there because, the audience needs a cut. Yeah, I wish we could train ourselves for this, from this fast.
Yeah, no, it seems like the genie's out of the bottle in that case. But just the fact too that most of us are carrying a smartphone around, it's like you always have something in your pocket to distract you. And if you lose focus on the movie for a second, and before you know it, you're thinking about your phone and you're not. But 20 years ago, we didn't have that problem. We didn't have to worry about our phones 20 years ago.
10 years ago, it seems.
10 years ago.
Yeah, no. So, yeah. Anyway, I want to make a film with less cuts. That's the goal of mine.
I do want to talk more of the technical stuff. So it's 16 millimeter. Black and white, and then some color at the end. So your lab, what lab do you use now? Because there aren't even that many film labs left.
Yeah, so for this film, I used Niagara Custom Lab, which is in Toronto, and they processed, and this was really, partly for expediency. I had them process and scan the film, and I can't remember the black and white stock, maybe like 72-22. And then the color was actually this like brand new re-released Ektachrome slide film that Kodak they had discontinued, and then they brought it back. And I was really eager to try it. And I thought, well, if there's a budget for film, I'm going to try this new film, which I did. And interestingly, though, I wasn't super stoked on how it looks compared to the negative films that Kodak makes right now. But it is cool to have it because I could throw it in a projector and even just like project it and stuff.
Yeah, I guess because it's a reversal film or a slide film, it is maybe tougher to transfer. Negative films are, I think, easier to transfer. You can kind of get more light through them, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't even know you could get it in 16 millimeter. That's interesting.
Yeah, they brought that back. And so, yeah, I had Niagara. They processed it and they digitized it. I also there's a lab in Montreal that I use for just color film called Mel's. But they don't do black and white stuff. So Niagara is great, actually, though, especially for artists. If there's any artists out there watching this and you're interested in shooting film, send it to Niagara in Toronto, and they do lots of really cool stuff. They also do digital to film work. So I've made stuff digitally that I wanted to have like a film look. And I know you can get filters and stuff, but their process is really cool. It's a cool place.
And they were able to do the Octochrome there too?
Oh yeah. Bada bing, bada boom. Yeah. And the process we paid for a rush fee too, right? So I like everything happened faster than it normally does for me. Normally because they're like, oh, we run E6 slide film on 1 day a week. And so, or they wait until they have enough that they can mix all the chemicals. So sometimes things take a lot longer than the quick turnaround time.
So I wanted to ask you about the double exposures again then, because since you are finishing digitally, you could have done those in digital post. So why is it important to you think to do that in camera?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could, there are ways to do it digitally. I would argue that they probably have a more digital look.
Yeah, I think you got a look that I don't think you can exactly replicate, but.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember the name of this fellow. So there's a YouTube video I found a couple years ago, and he might even be based out of Regina. A really tall guy with a deep voice. Who am I talking about?
Gerald Saul, maybe?
Yes, that's him. He put a YouTube video, a demo video of him on how to do the double exposure with a Bolex. And video, like, shout out to him.
Gerald, if you're listening, Gerald might be listening. If you're listening, just post something in the chat, please.
Yeah, so big shout out. Oh, Gerald's wife. Yes. Anyway, shout out to him. So, the process too of doing a double exposure in the moment, and winding that camera. I think unless you've used these cameras before, I don't know if you can fully appreciate it, but there's a feel to it, right? You feel the film running through the camera, and there's a connection to it. It's hard to explain.
Which is the same if you're editing. Now you edit it digitally, I guess, but that was always my feeling, cutting with scissors and tape on film, where you are literally feeling it. Like you will sometimes determine the length of a shot literally by holding it up and getting
and I mean, that way. For all the haters out there, I have made a film on a Steenbeck. So somebody asked Margaret.
So I'll just explain. Margaret is Gerald Saul's spouse. But yeah, there's a question here from Margaret.
Can you talk about the decision to add color footage at the very end? What do you like about black and white color? The reason I added color at the end, I mean, without giving anything away, I guess, is just, to provide viewers with hope and optimism. And lots of times black and white is viewed as like this dark sort of negative thing, and color is like rebirth, blah, blah, blah. But no, I wanted the vibrancy of the leaves, behind Riley, and the color of the water, and sort of just, boy, this is, Tarkovsky does this too, right? Where his movies are black and white, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they're color. And so I was definitely thinking of that when I did this as well.
No, and I just rewatched Wings of Desire as well, which is another fantastic use of black and white and color. Yeah,
it's fun to play with, to mix them up and do things a little bit differently. Again, like Mike said, like with these projects, I think we had a lot of creative freedom, because the producers were not. No, I'm just joking. But they were like, be super creative, and so I wanted to make the most of that.
Yeah. So Gerald Saul has posted in the comments, "Hi, glad that YouTube comes in handy sometimes." But yeah, it's crazy what. And we were talking about this before we started, like whether it's house repairs or making films, there's an insane amount of knowledge and people willing to share it on YouTube. And it's just a crazy good resource now.
Yeah, definitely. Doesn't beat in-person classes though. I mean, when those can come back, nothing beats the class.
All right. So I think maybe we'll switch over to Mike for a while there, and maybe we can go ahead with the Mike Maryniuk audio commentary track for his film June Night.
All right.
and I may interrupt you as well. Your film moves quite quickly, so
It
it'd be
does.
difficult to do
Cattle
scene-specific
auctioneer
commentary.
style. I have a National Film Board cookie cutter actually at home.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so this is all done on paper, and this is a little radio. It's really small. It's actually like this small. So Buster Keaton, he's just having his dinner. I bought a bunch of miniatures, and I bought a miniature pizza. I bought a miniature Fanta. This is him giving himself a home haircut. Yeah, that's from the haunted house. Yeah, I did a little keying in there to get it looked like it was moving. So the concept of time, there you go, goes to bed. And actually, this miniature was set in this was one that took 7 days. So it actually was lifting the bed up, and I did key out the background. I also like to play with, I'm getting behind. These are all photocopies as well, or printouts. So sometimes I play with the printer. The printer does this weird stuff. That's a little key in of the plants growing. The maestro was hilarious. 2 days after I did the shot, there was an article about a maestro playing to or an opera playing to a group of plants. All right, so he goes outside, and these are like conventions of just keeping a nice lawn and stuff like that. And we're kind of thinking about controlling nature and stuff like that. But there you go, you can't do that. Moment of self-realization. A big dead whale goes by. And so, yes, the wisdom of owls and whatever, how we treat animals, the police, all getting sucked into the kind of hole of whatever we want to call it. Some rodeo stuff, the endless pursuit of money, and in the hole you go. This is actually made with this gloop that we used on a Diana Thornycroft film, which is called Quake Hold, and it takes a really long time to move. So this is some close-ups of it as well. And that's actually just a little bit of it. I really love that whale shot. It was a real fun thing to find. And then young Buster Keaton sees something coming out of the water. That's actually my hand and my hat that I used for my film The Goose. And The Goose is a feature film I did. And young Buster Keaton meets large Buster Keaton, and they have a little once-over. There's a realization of how we do things so poorly as a species. Yeehaw, a little tribute to the Stampede. I guess tribute. Things are being blown away that are no longer necessary. There's gold, which is not necessary anymore. Gambling, and they all blow up in the sky, and everybody loves it. And some toxic masculinity goes by and blows up. And out come the flowers as things go. And then the butterfly effect, young and old. There they go, little butterflies of hope, little balls of pollen that are hopeful, and we'll start something new, being pollinated. Pop. And yeah, there's a realization that the film is over. Yeah, and then Buster Keaton sings June Night, which is from the National Film Board film, the documentary made about the National Film Board film, The Railrodder, which is Buster Keaton Rides Again. He actually shows up in Rivers, Manitoba, and receives the Manitoba Voyageur Award, which it's really funny. That's my favorite part of that film.
Yeah, I have a 16 millimeter print of that film, which when they closed down the NFB office in Regina, they were handing out film prints, and I have a 16 millimeter print in the other room there.
I have a bunch of stuff from when they did that in Winnipeg.
But I
coming
guess
to you next, Edmonton.
No, I've got some old.
I know.
Stuff.
I'm just joking.
So let's talk about reclaiming those old films then, because I guess you would have started with a digital copy of those Buster Keaton films and then kind of printed out individual frames and then cut them out. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, in some cases it was as simple as that, and in some cases it meant a process of up-resing them, because a lot of them were in 280 or something like that. So in order to stay on the right side of the archive.org public domain, we did that. And so that was, that was a big thing. But mostly it was choosing images that I thought I could work with early on and then just going for it. So you take a 3-second clip, turn it into 75, 1 second is 24 frames. So a 3-second clip is, 3 times that, 72 frames or whatever. And so I usually make on a piece of paper, I'll put a graph and I'll have 8 different images going at a time, and then I'll go through them all, cut them all out individually. So it'll be something like this, where I'll have different images in each one. Then I'll print them all out, either at home, well, in this case at home, because it's the only place I could do it. And I would just sit there and cut and cut and cut and cut. Yeah, I'll grab the box of them afterwards. But yeah, I cut out an individual amount, I think about 14,000 of the individual frames, which was insane.
Well, especially given the turnaround times that we were talking
Yeah,
about.
it was,
earlier.
it was when I started thinking about this is a process I did for the goose, and I was like, of all of the stupid tricks that you do, you chose this. It's the most time consuming, and it's that's what I chose, and so I just had to go with it. I couldn't go back. And there was talk of like doing some of it digitally and stuff like that, but like Conor says, there's magic in the process. And so the magic that I was finding in the process was printing something and then like coming back and realizing that it's all ruined because the last 20 or so were the ink ran out or something like that. And then you start cutting it out and you're like, I think I can probably salvage, this. It's just going to be different. So as you mature as an artist, you start to realize that it's really all that you keep is the mistakes, and all the scripted material and stuff like that. That's just like kind of like how you make something like something else. It's the mistakes that set you apart. So embracing your mistakes is probably the most important advice I could give to someone.
Yeah, no, the mistakes have always been the best part of my films, which is maybe a terrible thing to admit, but it's definitely true. So I just want to talk about the copyright thing for a second there. So Buster Keaton made 2 films with the National Film Board of Canada, The Railrodder, and then that documentary that was about the making of The Railrodder. And those, I believe, are in the public domain because they're old enough. Is that correct?
No, well, they were, because this was a National Film Board film.
Well, that too, yeah.
Yeah, so they were part of the archives. I actually don't have the list anymore, but I do have this Buster Keaton 3 Ages poster, the miniature poster. But I used to have a list of all the status of the public domain for all of Buster Keaton's work, so that if I was like thinking, because I had them all, and if I was thinking of using something, I would have to cross-reference that list. And yeah, I mean, public domain is great. And I obviously have an idea that I've worked with stuff that isn't in the public domain, and I don't have a problem doing that. But for this project, it just made sense. I really felt that, as I had all these archival images, and I needed someone to lead us through the process. And I thought, well, who could that be? And then I thought, well, maybe someone who's in the public domain, like Buster Keaton. I referenced him in The Goose, my feature film. And I came into filmmaking through these posters from 1926. And I was always looking for the Buster Keaton film, The Battling Butler, I believe it's called. Mm-hmm. And these were all silent comedies that I had. So I was always hoping for this Buster Keaton film. And as I kind of like immersed myself in that era, he became my favorite. And the deadpanness and stuff. So there's so much to the way his looks. There's an openness, and he just absorbs, any potential narrative and makes it has a connection to the viewer. It's like he allows the viewer to put whatever they're thinking into himself. It's perfect, right? And then the second part of that was, well, hey, like I think I might be able to find some footage of Buster Keaton actually talking, at the end. So I have young Buster Keaton meeting old Buster Keaton in these films. I might have him like giving advice to like a camera person or something like that, and I can have them meet and he could give himself advice. Ultimately, we didn't have access to like some of the cuts from that film or the B-roll stuff, and I never really found anything that really spoke to what I wanted to get across, other than him singing that song at the end, which was June Night, which was, I was working in June. It was my reference to night flowers and stuff like that, and it was him kind of speaking, or like letting it all out at the end as well. So,
but my oldest son is named Keaton, so that gives you some idea of how much I love Buster Keaton.
Right.
But the idea of the young Buster meeting the old Buster, I thought was just amazing. So, like, at what point in the process did you come up with that? Because it's just, I don't know, there's just something incredibly poignant about the two Busters meeting.
Sorry, yeah, I missed the start of that. I was reading a comment.
No. Just the fact, the idea of having the old Buster meet the young Buster, like, where did that come in the process? Because it's just really poignant.
Yeah, I mean, it came from while I was making the film, I spent all of while I was cutting everything, I basically was working right over here, looking down. I had my computer going, and I was watching live streams of the U.S. at that time, which was, protests in all these different cities. And I was kind of like, it was this kind of reckoning, and it was like this moment of reflection, and it was an opportunity for, young people to say, to older people, this is not how we want to do things anymore. And so it was like, for me, it was like I was getting to know the streamers as well, like just by watching them constantly. One of them is actually thanked in the credits, and without them knowing, but yeah, it was, that's where it started. And then I guess just the idea that if we're shedding all this stuff, it's like, if we're reimagining something new, we need to get, advice from, an older version of yourself, or the older version of yourself needs to get advice from the younger version of yourself. Right. I think that's probably closer to it, is that you have to think like, with a degree of innocence and a degree of, shed some cynicism in order to allow new ideas to happen.
Well, and if you know anything about Buster Keaton's life story, which was in some ways kind of tragic, he battled with alcoholism, and he lost his fortune at, maybe twice, where he was at one time the richest man in Hollywood, and then later on he wasn't. So it's, I don't know, it's really loaded, I guess, if you know anything about Buster Keaton's life. Yeah, and then the other thing that is really interesting is he's one of the first independent filmmakers, and then he was asked to joined MGM, and it ruined his career. He ruined his life, and so there's that question that you always ask yourself as an artist as well when you do certain things: is how will this decision affect the rest of my artistic trajectory? Yeah. Or is this the end? Okay. So just a reminder, if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Or Conor, if you have any questions for Mike, if you have any questions for Conor. But there is always an issue in terms of public domain where, a film is often old enough, but if the Criterion Collection restores a film, it's like you can kind of copyright the new version. So you mentioned you did have to source from archive.org to make sure that everything was sort of on the up and up?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you can do that. You know what? Actually, most of their stuff is in fair quality. But there's deep learning software called De-Oldify. There's other deep learning stuff that is up-resing everything right now. So that was really interesting as well. It was kind of the trailing off in the other side of the tech land. So it's interesting. De-Oldify, you can go and you can turn a old black and white photo into a color photo now. But yeah, there's some other examples that of I think they put out the, what's that Never Gonna Give You Up song, Rick Astley. There's a version of a 480 version, standard definition version turned into 4K that's floating around YouTube right now. So this is you know, there was a lot of I shoot on film a lot as well, and I love the fact that I can, like, you know, get my films that I had in standard definition turned into 5K, 8K, whatever right now. But, you know, there is this deep learning software that is able to turn standard definition stuff into 4K, 8K as well. So, yeah.
And John Montez has posted a link there, busterkeaton.org/copyright home. So I imagine that's where we can get information about copyright on the Buster Keaton films. But just one last technical question. So a lot of that, like, you're dealing with time lapse of plants growing, and you're like going in and switching out the paper figures sometimes, like.
Yeah, so I did do that on occasion. So where I would do that is just, I have a little table beside me here, and I would be working on something, and then a timer would go off every minute, right? Because I also want to, if I just did it every one after another, the plants would barely move.
Yeah.
So I knew that I would have to do it every minute. So I thought, I can do this throughout the day. I'll just burn a day on these 3 seconds, right? And so that's what I did. So I'd be like typing away, and something would be like, oh, and now is the time to put in a new one. Anyhow, I got to about 2, or no, I did 3 seconds, and I was like, okay, that is never going to happen again.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was sometimes shooting them against green screen and doing a composite there. And it was important, you know, because then I could resize stuff. And but, you know, a lot of the stuff was locked in, and that's why I had images of him sleeping and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, couldn't all be done that way. That would have been totally insane. It just would have been terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have no problem doing some compositing and.
Yeah, I do. I mean, the younger version of myself wouldn't have allowed that, but you know, for this, it was about. Also, I had just gotten off of doing a production designed short film for Guy Madden, Galen Johnson, and Evan Johnson, which is a tribute to Fellini. It's called The Rabbit Hunters. It's on the Criterion channel.
Big deal.
Yeah, anyways, so I made a bunch of sets, right, for that, and it was all, you know, compositing. So it was like we've got a bunch of cattails and stuff like that, and so we shot a bunch of cattails. And you know, the joke was, you know, that I was making the sets too big, and that we could just do this in a closet. So we finished that, and probably a week after I had dropped all the gear off, it was very apparent that while I was trying to, like, you know, wrap out that short film, it became pretty apparent that there was going to be a lockdown. And yeah, so that was how that knowledge kind of spilled into this film as well.
Yeah. And so did that ever get finished, or like
that?
It's finished now, I guess, but it was locked down for a while.
Oh, it was a 6-minute film, and yeah, it was. You know, it's out there with his collection. It's played in Berlin and stuff like that, and yeah, I mean, it was an interesting experience. You know, it was. I actually got into it because someone said, "Who should we get to do the production design?" And someone said, "How about Mike?" And they said, "Yeah, sure." And then they contacted me, and they were like, "No, I meant the other Mike? And they're like, oh, well, we called Mike Maryniuk. And they're like, ooh, I don't know if that's a good idea. And they're like, well, he's going to be here in an hour. So that's literally how it happened. And Galen made a film in this series as well.
Oh, right. Yeah. So
that's how things
Conor,
happen in Winnipeg. Sorry.
Conor, do you work on other productions as well, or do you just work by yourself? Or you?
I a bunch of stuff. I guess I was gonna DP a film, like just be the cinematographer, but then it got postponed indefinitely, I guess, right when the lockdowns happened, and then actually I'm in the process right now of just wrapping up an episode for CBC Gem for a series called Farm Crime, and I directed an episode of a series, and that was it's been a totally new experience for me. Being just a director on an established, I mean, this is for season 2. So there's a look, there's sound cues, there's narrator. I keep on thinking, I feel sort of like, when Stanley Kubrick had to direct Spartacus.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Kubrick directed Spartacus, and he didn't get to do things the way he wanted to do it. But hey, he got paid. So no, I'm having a really good experience learning. Like it's different, but I'm learning a lot, which is really cool.
And what is the show? Tell me again what the...
Yeah, it's called Farm Crime. It's on CBC Gem. And yeah, season 1 is out. Season 2 comes out, I think, at the end of March or early April. And it's short documentaries, 20 minute long documentaries about rural crime. And so the episode I directed is about these paint horses that were stolen from a Nakota elder in Morley, Alberta. And so back in December, we got to go down, and it was like a 3-day shoot. And it was really cool. Normally, I'm like schlepping gear. I'm like setting everything up, doing all, like being the producer as well on all my stuff. And this, I was just the director, and I was like, what? I don't have to carry that over there? Like, you're like, no, you're the director. And I was like, okay, like, it was a good experience. But yeah, I do educational work with the university here. I'm doing some educational films, and so it's sort of, like this film here, very present, and working with the NFB, all-time best experience, one of the best experiences I've ever had, because they let me be as creative as I wanted to be. And there's lots of freedoms and stuff, but I have bills to pay, and I don't always get to be an auteur, if you will. Sometimes I have to be a director for hire, which is cool too. I'm blessed. Like, working in film is, like, especially during this pandemic, I mean, I'm super lucky. So
yeah, well, and it struck me right from the beginning that filmmakers seemed like the perfect people to take on a pandemic. Like, filmmakers are problem solvers by their very nature. So, like, it made sense to me that if anybody could figure out how to work in a pandemic, it would be filmmakers. I remember when there was the big, Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans years ago, like everything was flooded, and Steven Soderbergh made a comment like that, because it didn't seem like anything was getting fixed. Like, these people weren't getting water, they weren't getting food. And his comment was, well, they should get a film production manager down there, and, they would have everybody sorted.
Or like I've been saying, this lockdown, or these lockdowns and social distancing and stuff, it's kind of normal for me. Like, I edit alone in my basement. I often shoot alone or with one other person. So I'm kind of used to just being alone in my occupation, which, sometimes sucks, but
yeah, that was the first 20 years of my career for sure. But like I say, I was asked to maybe do a pandemic film, but and I didn't want to add any more pressures, or especially if there was sort of a deadline involved. So that's where I, would have balked at anything, is the idea of, I don't know, there was so much uncertainty that I didn't want to bring any deadlines in on myself. But yeah, obviously you guys didn't have a problem with that.
No, deadlines, I don't know about Mike, but if I don't have a deadline, I'm gonna work on something for a really, really long time. It's when there's like, oh, I want to submit to a film festival, or in this case, Koti, my producer and friend, she was like, so yeah, you can make this film, but like you need to have it done by this date. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. And it was like, there goes my summer. Not like I had big plans for the summer, but it was a summer spent in the basement editing.
Yeah. So is your personal work then kind of, you shoot on film when it's your personal work, and then when it's something else, it's digital?
Yeah, 100%. I'm working on a personal piece right now with funding from the Canada Council, which bless. And it's I'm aiming for it to be a feature documentary about a painter, George Littlechild, and I'm shooting that all on the Arri SR2 and shooting it on film. And I'm gonna follow this ethos or whatever of less cuts in this film. This film is gonna be so boring. I want to make the most boring. No, I'm just kidding. But I want to slow it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and the SR2 you can have 400-foot mag, so you get like 11 minutes. So it's a little better than the 27 seconds on a Bolex.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Can you have a monitor with the SR2?
Well, it's the SR3 that I'm using, and you can have a monitor, but the co-op I'm part of, Fava, for those that don't know, which they have it, and I seem to be one of the only people that take out the film gear on a regular basis. No, the monitor connection thing is broken, so no monitor. So lots of locked off shots where I'm just like looking through and we were shooting. My friend and I were shooting last week, and it was pretty cold here, and we were both wearing masks because I was like, "Hey, we're gonna be in close proximity. He's my camera assistant. Let's wear masks outside." And I wasn't thinking, because as I was trying to frame shots, the viewfinder just fogged right up. And so for most of the shoot, I couldn't see what was happening through the viewfinder. So everything was focus infinity. And I was just like, yeah, okay, that looks like a good frame, I guess. But it was like, I couldn't see anything through the viewfinder.
Yeah, you forget about those things. Like the last time I shot on film, it was like there was a fixed viewfinder that you couldn't swivel, So it's like every single shot, you're like breaking your neck to try and see anything.
I love it. It's fun.
Yeah.
There's a warming feature on the SR3 for that eyepiece as well.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
To keep it from fogging up.
I'll look into that for next time.
For next winter, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and see if they can get that, the video tap.
Oh,
fixed.
Well, that's just another thing to carry, though. I don't want to have to carry around a box.
Yeah, that's true. The last thing I edited on film, I was able to cut on a 35 millimeter Steenbeck in about 2003 at the Film Co-op in Toronto at Lift. And a shout out to all the film co-ops in Canada, because I'm assuming, we are all well familiar with them. But just as I was finishing, it was a fantastic Steenbeck. Like somebody had donated this pretty much new 35 millimeter Steenbeck that had barely been used. And I just finished the last shot on the film, and I rewound the film, and then it wouldn't stop winding. Like I would turn it off and it just kept running. And it took them about 3 years to get it fixed. Like it was, when this gear kind of goes wrong. So like that video tap can probably be fixed on that SR, but you've got to find somebody, from the old days. Maybe.
And is it worth it?
And is it worth it? Yeah.
But I saw, so John has a question about the sound, and I was actually wanting to ask Mike this as well. Like, can you talk about the sound in your film and the sound design?
Yeah, so Andy Rudolph, who is a legendary musician in Winnipeg and works at Video Pool, is the technical coordinator. or a workshop coordinator, but is like a kind of a technical genius as well. He did all the design and worked with some kind of like archival sounds and reimagined them. And he also worked with artists Aaron Funk, who's known as Venetian Snares, and Sarah Jo Kirsch, who to do some more melodic stuff. It all kind of gets, you know, kind of kneaded into the dough of the raisin bread that is the soundtrack. So yeah, I mean, so it's I worked with him in the past, and it was just you know, really natural, and it's really rich, and it's for something with limited dialogue, it's really important to breathe life into these images, and I think he did a great job.
Yeah, and I think that's another case where the turnaround time is a big deal, because of course sound is often kind of left, you know, maybe too late in the process. So, you know, the fact that you had this really elaborate visuals, but then, you know, the soundtrack's really elaborate too. So was there a time crunch there, like to be able to get all that done?
Oh yeah, I mean, but you know what, only a year and a half earlier, I'd finished a feature film. It got into Rotterdam before it was done, which is a terrible idea, because then we were like, okay, well, I'm just going to finish the last bit of animation, and we'll just start working on the sound. And, you know, it's like, well, how long is that? Well, they need it actually in 4 weeks. And it's a feature film, right? So he was used to it, and he is one of those people who thrives in those kind of like moments, and is just like, okay, blah, 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 delegate, you know, so-and-so is going to be doing this portion, and so-and-so is going to be doing this portion, and I'm going to get some fireworks done with Venetian snares, and, you know, Sarah's going to do this like operatic stuff, and, you know, we're just going to record all this stuff, and okay, yeah, just sounds great. And he just goes for it. So yeah, it was fun. And you know what? He had different versions of it, and they all worked, you know. But I was like, well, let's just go with the one that you have on top, because it's the one you feel the strongest about.
Yeah, well, back in the day, as filmmakers in Saskatchewan, we always had to go to Winnipeg to do our sound mixes, because that was like, you know, the closest place that had film mixing facilities. So I remember at least one time of, you know, staying up for 2 days straight, editing 16 millimeter mag stock tracks, and then having to drive to Winnipeg in a snowstorm for the sound mix.
It's always a snowstorm. Hey,
it's always a snowstorm. Yeah.
Starts at the border.
I should chime in here. My sound person, Dimitri Bandet, who's been one of my best buddies since grade 1. He's worked with me on a number of my projects, and he's great. He doesn't have any like formal training. Just like years ago, I bought him like one of those thick, like how to be a sound film sound, because he was into music sound. And I said, no. I need like a movie sound person to help me with my stuff. And he goes above and beyond with the Foley work. Like he'll, you know, bring into his studio sand and mud and wood, and I'm pretty certain John has actually been to Dimitri's studio before on a different project. But yeah, just somebody that I trust like 100%. I was just, you know, in a lot of my notes for him were like, just I want to really hear the texture of that wood, like when Riley's running his axe up and down the log. Like I want to hear that and like turn it up. So yeah, big shout out to Dimitri.
And something we should explain maybe for people who don't know, but the Bolex not only does not record sound
right
as a camera, but it also makes a racket. Like it's a spring wound thing that makes a lot of noise. So, you know, you are pretty much always having to do the sound afterwards.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I did the recording with Riley on my Marantz. And the funny thing about this Bolex sound that it makes is I've had Dimitri just record the Bolex sound to re-add into edits, because I'm like, no, this sound is synonymous with this camera, and without the sound of it, it might throw people off. And so, you know, I don't think in this film we did this, but in other films I've been like, no, just turn the Bolex sound up and let it take over.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, and of course, doing animation, I guess you're pretty much always doing the sound afterwards, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, similar thoughts on Foley and stuff done organically. Then that's what Andy, who did it for me, is great at. He's not kind of just comfortable with finding the canned sound. Although we did use some stuff that we found on the National Film Board has something called a Sonotech, where you can get sounds from, and yeah, so we got some from there, and yeah, I feel the same way.
I think Dimitri mentioned this Sonotech to me, and he said he found for the tree fall, it's like a buildup of a number. He described it to me, and I don't remember exactly the process, but he said he pulled a lot of stuff from that database, and he was like, "Oh, I can't believe I had access to all these sound files," and yeah, so it was.
They're great, and they sound old too, you know, because they're not recorded digitally, right? So they're recorded on Nagra, and so they're recorded on 1/4-inch tape, and so there's a quality to those sounds that is like timeless, and is I think it's, you know, why your film. When I watch your film, when he's with the wood, you can almost smell the wood, and that's because of the sound. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll let Dimitri know.
It's because of the sound. Yeah.
No, the National Film Board has an amazing archive, but I didn't know about the audio. That's great.
Yeah, when I found out, I was like, how come I just found out about it?
How come I didn't know about this before?
And freesound.org too, if people don't know about that, but a lot of it is copyright-free sounds that people have recorded and uploaded. Some of them have copyright restrictions, some of them are completely copyright-free, but freesound.org is a great place to get audio as well. All right, well, I think we're getting close to the end here. Is there any I'm hoping there might be some last questions from our audience, if anybody wants to type in anything there. Or Sarah, do we have anything else we need to chat about?
I think I just wanted to add that again, shout out to Gerald and him doing that demo video, because I know Lindsay McIntyre had shown me years ago, or Aaron Munson when I got into filmmaking had shown me how to do that, but then I totally forgot the process, and I was Googling it and came across this video, and the fact that he's watching on this live stream, goes to show that Canadian cinema or Canadian, art cinema is maybe more tight knit than people realize.
Prairie cinema.
Yeah, there you
that
go.
Too.
We don't get a chance to say that a lot, so
it is a small community for sure. Actually, I wanted to plug this weekend. There's another couple of online events coming up from Regina, the Film Students Association of Regina. So I teach at the University of Regina Department of Film, and the film students there put on a film festival every year. So it's going to be an online event this year. So they'll be screening some films online, but there's 2 great talks coming up this weekend. The first one is Mina Shum, Vancouver filmmaker Mina Shum is going to be online Friday night talking with our students at the U of R, and then Maryniuk on Saturday, who's a production designer in Canadian film. But yeah, it is a small world here in Canadian film.
What's that festival called? Because I think I won an award from a Regina-based.
Yeah, it's now called the Living Skies Student Film Festival for the last several years. Before that, it was just called the National Student Film Festival, I think. It's one of the oldest student film festivals there is, and
okay, I'm thinking of a different one, a different small Regina Film Festival that a few years ago I made an Oilers themed film.
Okay, yeah, there's is that the Pile of Bones? Pile of Bones? Yeah.
That's what it was. Yeah, so cool.
Yeah, Pile of Bones. Mike Rollo has added to the chat. Yeah, the Pile of Bones Festival in Regina.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything you want to plug? Anything coming up? Anything you want to mention?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this this CBC episode that's going to come out right away. And yeah, I don't know. I have so many projects on the go right now that I don't know which is which. But you know, shout out to John for and the organizers for putting this together, and Brian and Mike. It was awesome talking to both of you. And I went and looked up, you know, your other films and stuff before this, and you know, I'm these kind of artist talkbacks. I'm like, I can't believe that I'm talking with these legends.
Well, likewise.
Of Canadian, of prairie art house cinema. You know, it's sweet.
Mike, anything to plug?
I don't know. I was just reading. That's very nice. No, it's a pleasure to be with you as well. And one thing that while we were leading up to this, I was making fun of Conor's hat because it's an Oilers hat. So I wore a Winnipeg Thunder hat, which was a basketball team we had a long time ago. And I don't know, to plug, I made a project of an animation. I just kind of looked around my workspace here, and it's all about the oil pipelines, and it's viewed through like a 8-foot long plexiglass tube. You watch the whole film by sticking your face in a tube. So it'll never happen. No one will ever see it because it's like the most COVID non-compliant thing you could ever do. Yeah, so there's that. But this is this like oil encrusted duck from it. Yeah. So yeah, I'm finishing projects that'll never be seen. It's a pretty good economic model.
Yeah, that pretty much sums up being a Canadian filmmaker, I think.
Yeah. I made a film for our music video I just finished for Paul Leary from the Butthole Surfers, which is called Gary Floyd Revisited. It's out there. And then someone asked in the chat, give a quick short list of films to watch. So I'll maybe name a few. Oh, there it is. So I would say Fast Film by Virgil Weidrich, which is an inspiration to my film. I would say the scratch animation work of Carolyn Leaf through the National Film Board. And I would say if I were to plug something that is very prairie, but is also something I did with the filmmaker Matthew Rankin, is Cattle Call, which is was quite successful. And I would say Daryl Niepenak's film Indian is a great 1-minute film, and that's something I'm trying to think about more, is super short films. It's a Winnipeg legend. And yeah, maybe I'll pass it on to Conor.
Boy, oh boy, yeah, I've got lots of films to watch. What did I get from the library? The Rider, Cold War. Since Sean Connery passed away, I'm gonna watch this. I've heard good things. But no, I mostly watch children's cartoons with my daughter. Troll Hunters. I don't know anyone out there with kids. Troll Hunters. I highly recommend. It's Guillermo del Toro created it. It's on Netflix, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna embarrass myself. I just finished watching Peaky Blinders, which I'd never seen before. So you know, I do like art house stuff, but I also like just zoning out and watching you know, Peaky Blinders is like a soap opera, if you will, a fancy high budget soap opera.
Yeah, nice.
This is garbage. And I mean, I watch the Oilers lose all the time too. So that's
So how do you feel about the Canadian teams playing other Canadian teams all the time?
I have really mixed feelings that hockey is even happening right now. I really feel like there should be probably other things going on that are more important than having these millionaires playing. So I don't know. I just, yeah, whatever. Hockey schmucky.
Mhm.
And then I deal with this dog all the time. I have a dog right here that's been bugging me. He's got a cone on his head from surgery.
Yeah.
he's been bugging me this entire time.
I bet.
That's a great shot, but I didn't hear him at all.
No, he's pretty quiet. Yeah, so I wish I had better picks.
No, that's great. Okay, well, I think we're coming to the end of our time here, unless Sarah has anything to add. If anyone else has anything to add. But I guess not. So we'll wrap it up. So thanks a lot, guys. It's been a great chat.
Cool.
And yeah, thanks again to the NFB, the Dunlop Art Gallery, the RPL Film Theater for hosting us. It's been a lot of fun.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks to all of them.
I'm just going to look at my script here to see if there was something I was supposed to do at the end.
While you're doing that, I have a comment.
Yeah.
One thing is, I think we all want to thank the National Film Board for for getting to do these films, but I also want to acknowledge the Canada Council for the Arts, which you did earlier, because the Canada Council for the Arts creates the elbow room for risk-taking filmmaking, and so with a project like this, the National Film Board looked to the risk-taking filmmakers, and so that could only happen with the Canada Council for the Arts supporting diverse artists throughout Canada. So we're just lucky to be a part of that ecosystem.
Yeah, no, I can second that for sure. The Canada Council and here in Saskatchewan, the Saskatchewan Arts Board has been awesome. So yes, I do have a script for the end here. Thanks to the filmmakers, the RPL and the NFB, we did that. Remember to tune in to the next discussion featuring filmmakers from The Curve, which will be live streamed next Tuesday, March 9th, 7 p.m. on the RPL Film Theater's Facebook and YouTube channels. If you want to watch the films online, the films we talked about today, the link is at the top of the chat. If you want to go back, you could probably also Google them too. Very Present by Conor McNally and June Night by Mike Maryniuk. And they will also be screened at the RPL Film Theater on Wednesday, March 10th at 1:30 p.m. And that is a socially distant but in-person screening.
Cool.
So with that, I think we'll just sign off and say goodnight, everybody.
Right on. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Conor.
Thanks a lot.
Nice chatting with you.